Thank you so much to Daniel Carr, the bagpiper, for that beautiful processional. Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for coming and joining us today. Is there, can you guys hear me? Can everybody hear me? Okay. So hello and thank you for coming, whether you're here in person or tuning in virtually. We're glad to have you join us today as we celebrate the lives of Carole and Sam Cooper. My name is Suzanne Hartman, and this is my sister, Deidre Orr. We are their godchildren. The Coopers were very special people, and we are grateful to have had them in our lives, to have known them. They would be pleased to have so many people here to honor them and pay their respects today. As a reminder, we just ask people as well to silence their cell phones during the service. And without further ado, I'll hand the floor over to my sister Dee now. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Sue, and thank you, Daniel. Daniel and my daughter did Scottish dancing together, so it was a welcome surprise. Again, just thank you to everyone for traveling up. And I wanted to just say a quick little thank you to the Fawcett Funeral technical crew there that are running the live stream for us, so that the family and friends in Scotland and England and across Canada can be with us here today to share this celebration of life for Carole and Sam. The first thing on the program is the Serenity Prayer. I just wanted to mention that if you see that your name is coming up, you could have a seat on the chair there just to keep our celebration flowing, so that you're closer to the podium. The Serenity Prayer is attributed to Reinhold Niebuhr, and it goes like this. Most of you have heard it. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as the pathway to peace, taking, as he did, the sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that he will make things right if I surrender to his will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever and ever in the next. Amen. For all of us present here today, physically, virtually, or in spirit, we know these words have so many special meanings on so many levels for Carole and Sam and for many of us. And although I've heard and read this prayer, this poem many times, today I hear these poignant words spoken in their voices, especially the famous first lines, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, the wisdom to know the difference. These are the words of wisdom that Carole and Sam would give to us right now to help us with our grief with these losses. We were so blessed to have them in our lives that these losses are profound, and not a day goes by that I don't feel their absences. Some of the words in the second stanza read like a blueprint for Carole and Sam's lives together, living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time. This excerpt is the essence of Carole and Sam's life together. They truly enjoyed every moment they shared. Both Carole and Sam have told me on so many occasions that they each had a really good life. They loved being together. They loved doing simple things. Every task had joy in it. Living with them was a precious gift to me, and I was included in their moments of fun and joy, surrounded by warmth and love. In recent years, they couldn't do some of the things that they had loved doing together, but they still found ways, many ways, to have their fun with each other. I'll share a little story from the time I was living there with them. Everyone knows that Carole was so careful about good food and nutrition, an amazing cook. But with the grocery order, she would buy chocolate bars for Sam, but not in the way that you'd get your grocery bag and take out the chocolate bar and give it to Sam. Here's your chocolate. It had to be more special. She would hide them in a basket in the cupboard so that Sam could have the fun of sneaking into the cupboard to cut off little pieces of the chocolate bar when he thought no one was looking. After lunch or dinner, you could offer him a little sweet dessert, cakes or squares or anything that they would have on hand. And most often he would accept, sometimes he wouldn't. But later he'd be making some excuse to be pacing back and forth to the kitchen. And he would sneak in and cut his little piece of chocolate. At grocery time, Carole would look at me with a smile and say, "How are we for chocolate?" It became one of my regular tasks to keep an eye on that chocolate stash. The next phrase of the Serenity poem, Serenity Prayer, accepting hardships as the pathway to peace. While Carole and Sam both, they really had a way of seeing the silver linings, even facing death. Sam would often say, "Carole saved my life. I never would have beaten cancer without her. She loved me back to life." Every challenge was met with optimism, positive thinking, and incredible inner strength. Every challenge was an opportunity to express profound love and courage. They really loved the life that they had built together. They embraced every challenge with the strength of their love and their commitment to each other. Our godmother Carole was a true inspiration to all who knew and loved her, but especially to young and impressionable goddaughters, my sister and I, and later years to our daughters, Samantha and Camille. She was always so elegant and sophisticated, intelligent, gorgeous, gracious, loving, attentive, but always so down to earth and encouraging. She was an amazing woman and an exceptional role model for us. When she married Sam, he became our godfather. Sam relished accepting the role. He was good at it. He already had 2 godsons in Scotland, Peter Jordan and Ian McKechnie. He was a true father figure to everyone, and he was a natural storyteller. He would love to entertain and encourage others with his many inspiring life stories. And he was also a natural teacher, maybe born out of his talent as a salesman. Or maybe that's why he was a great salesman. You'd think he was telling you a story for fun, for amusement, entertainment, but then it would hit you a little later, or maybe a lot later, that there was a gentle message in there for you, or a subtle lesson for you to learn. He was brilliant. Together, they were incredible, a real dynamic duo. Theirs was a partnership that we could only wish for and want to emulate. As the news spread that we had lost both of them, no one was really surprised that one followed the other. Sam would follow Carole anywhere, and she would follow him. There was a real consensus that they were meant to be together. The last part of this prayer was more about embracing life as it is, about unconditional love and acceptance, which Carole and Sam exemplified for me, and for counseling us to find love and happiness in the imperfection of the world as we find it. Carole and Sam could always see the perfection. Living with Carole and Sam, we had many group calls where they would introduce me into conversations with so many people, many of you here today or joining us today. And it was an honor for me to share such warm and lovely friendships and glimpse some of the loving relationships that they had. And hearing the calls that came to the house after Carole left us, and then Sam, so many people would share stories with me of how Carole or Sam or both of them had touched their life and made a real difference. This is a real testament to them, to their precious souls. Everywhere they went, to live, to visit on holiday, to shop, to golf, to walk, to go to a doctor's appointment, they made friends and some very deep, lasting friendships. When overwhelmed by heartbreak, that they are no longer with us, I try to focus on the love that they gave us. They were genuine. Carole and Sam accepted people into their hearts, and they held them there. Love imprints a memory on the heart that no one can erase. To close, I want to share a few last words that I hear in Carole's voice. Thanks to Andrea, their niece in the UK, who recently reminded me of these words at a particularly appropriate moment. These words were originally spoken by the fearless Winnie the Pooh to his fragile friend Piglet. Today, these words reverberate to me in Carole's lovely voice. Excuse me. If ever there is a tomorrow when we are not together, there is something that you must always remember. You are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. The most important thing is, even if we're apart, I'll always be with you. And thank you, Carole and Sam. I'd like to introduce Ken Walton now to come up. He is Carole's cousin, and he will share a few words. Thank you. Ken?
Thank you, Dee. Dear family and friends and neighbors, my name is Ken Walton. I am Carole's first cousin on her father's side. My father, Basil, was Carole's father's third eldest brother. On behalf of my partner, Glendine Tutton, my sister, Karen McLeod, and her husband, Jack, from Chilliwack, BC, my son, Chris, who is here with us, from Mississauga, my son, Terry, from Portland, Oregon, my niece, Heather Bennett McLeod, my nephews, John McLeod and Alan McLeod from BC. We welcome you here today to help celebrate Carole's and Sam's life with our memories. Carole and I were very close in age. As youngsters, I remember being invited to her home for a wonderful roast beef and Yorkshire pudding dinner, prepared by the best cook in the world, her mother, my Aunt Sue. That's where Carole picked up the art of presenting a fabulous dinner. If you were ever invited for dinner, you know what I'm talking about. After dinner, Carole and I would do what most older siblings do, tease my young sister, Karen. Isn't that what brothers do? Did you know that Carole was an accomplished pianist? and she also worked very hard at becoming a figure skater. Many of you know she was very good at putting a brush to canvas. Carole was a very gifted person. Carole and I had a tradition that she started when we were in our teens. And that was a long time ago. She would phone me on my birthday every September the 1st. And I would reciprocate on her birthday, September the 22nd. However, this year was different. That phone call never came. But that will be in my memory forever. When Carole and I were ready to begin working, her father, who worked for the Toronto Star, paved the way for us to start our first working days at the Star. Many of you who knew Carole knew she was a strong person. She fought her disease every inch of the way. She had been down that road before with her mother and her father, as they too had fallen to this disease. Carole and Sam were meant for each other. They enjoyed a wonderful life together as partners. They were golfing buddies and supported each other in all activities in their retirement. In their retirement, they spent many years traveling to Florida to escape the severe winters here, getting involved in community activities and politics. Yes, we miss them in our lives. However, we can reflect back on the many pieces of advice each gave us to ponder about. For those of you who don't know, Suzanne and Dee are nieces of my cousin Frank and Irene Folks on my mother's side. Their mother, Kathy, is Irene's sister. Indeed, it is a small world. On behalf of the Walton and McLeod families, I would like to acknowledge our deep gratitude to Suzanne and Dee for their part as godchildren to Sam and Carole. They have done a wonderful job of taking care of Sam and Carole through their sickness and making arrangements in a very difficult time in our lives so we could all be here today. You have done Carole and Sam proud. Thank you. Just another note, Collingwood is part of the Walton family history. Our Uncle Harold was vice president and general manager of the shipyards. Along with his brother Norman, they ran the shipyards in the 50s and 60s. So it's fitting that the memorial bench for Sam and Carole, placed in Whites Bay Park, facing the shipyards, so they can keep guard over the harbor for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ken, for those loving words and insightful tribute. Sadly, I don't believe that the bench faces the shipyards, but we can get to that later. We'll see it down the road later on. Inseparable. If there was one word to describe Carole and Sam, it would be inseparable. Together, Carole and Sam shared a love like no other. And when Carole took ill and quickly passed on December the 27th, 2020, at Campbell House Hospice, Sam was inconsolable. Within days, he was admitted to hospital and declined so quickly, he was transferred to the same hospice. A mere 19 days after Carole's death, he joined the love of his life on January 15th, 2021. Sadly, none of us can deny the cruel indignities of sickness and aging that rob us of the ones we love before their time. We can only rejoice today in their memory and how they touched our lives. Carole would have turned 79 this past Wednesday. September 22nd was her birthday. We knew Carole before she was married. She and our mother, Kathy, were good friends. Once she met Sam, they were seldom apart. It was hard to think of one without the other. I remember their wedding day. It was a beautiful service held in the historical Kingsway area in Toronto. I'd never been to a Scottish wedding before. And as a young teenager, seeing Sam in his kilt and hearing the bagpipes play made a real impression on me. Daniel actually reminded me, I don't know if I can actually hear the bagpipes play without tearing up and getting emotional. Carole looked stunning that day, radiant with joy. She was always so stylish. Sam was a romantic who never tired of singing Carole's praises. During our visits, Sam sometimes surprised us by reciting bits of poetry. He was proud of his Scottish heritage and shared his appreciation for Robbie Burns, the famed national poet of Scotland. Almost every year we'd hear from Carole and Sam about the wonderful Burns suppers that they attended, so it seemed fitting to include one of his poems. My Love is Like a Red, Red Rose by Robbie Burns. My love is like a red, red rose that's newly sprung in June. My love is like a melody that's sweetly played in tune. As fair art thou, my bonny lass, so deep in love am I. And I will love thee still, my dear, till all the seas gone dry. Till all the seas gone dry, my dear, and the rocks melt with the sun. And I will love thee still, my dear, while the sands of life shall run. And fare thee well, my only love, fare thee well a while. And I will come again, my love, though 'twere 10,000 mile. You may notice in their honor, we've placed a single red rose at every table. And I would welcome everyone from each table to take one of the roses home for you as a memorial, a memory for attending today. We're about to watch a video from the Cooper family. Most of the Coopers still live in the UK, and we're not able to travel at this time, but I believe they are joining us now via live stream. If you are, I want to say hello. Thank you for taking the time to prepare the videos that we're about to watch. First, we'll hear from Sam's brother, Ian Cooper, in Scotland. He credits his daughter, Andrea, and her husband, Jim, for helping him to put the video together. Their children and Ian's grandchildren, Kat and Keir Luden, will also share some of their memories. Kat from the Glasgow area in Scotland and Keir from Los Angeles, California. So without further ado, if we could play that video. Thank you.
(1934 to 2021). Sam was the first-born son of Samuel Watson Cooper and Isabella Cooper, née Prentice, while residing at 846 Cantown Road, Glasgow. In his early childhood, his favourite times were family holidays in his beloved Rossi on the Isle of Bute. Free to wander through the woods, visit amusement arcades, play on the beach, and fish from the ferry pier. His love for Rossi lasted throughout his life. Football, also known as soccer, was also his passion. He would play on the road, there were very few cars in those days, with the local lads until his mum called him in for supper and bed. At secondary school, he was chosen to play for Glasgow School's under-14 team on a tour of 3 cities in England. In his final year at school, he captained the senior team in the final of the Scottish Schools Shield at Scotland's National Stadium, Hampden Park. At this school, there was a young student who suffered from various ailments and was a prime target for the bully boys. Sam's task, at the behest of the head teacher, was to ensure the lad's well-being. Alistair Gray survived his time at school and went on to become a Scottish literary and artistic icon. Job well done, Sam. From 1954 to 1956, he carried out his compulsory national military service in the RAF in Austria and was the proud owner of a VW Beetle. Many years later, his second love came into his life, his beautiful Ford Mustang. Wow. On his demob, he worked as a salesman, firstly for Hoover and then Heinz 57. Much of his time was spent in Aberdeen. While at Heinz, he won the Top Salesman Award several times, which entitled him to a free trip to Paris for a week. Like a dutiful son, he took his mum. At age 40, Sam decided that a change of scenery and a new adventure was needed, so he emigrated to Canada with the help of his cousin Donald Livingston. Toronto was the first port of call, and it was here that he met and married the love of his life, Carole Ann. Sam was not without his problems, but with Carole's stalwart support, he overcame them and went on to establish a successful employment agency. On his retirement, he and Carole moved to Collingwood, an old shipbuilding town on Georgian Bay, which had been transformed into a ski and golf resort, perfect for a couple of golf fanatics. In 2003, his brother Ian and Kyle, his nephew, enjoyed their hospitality in their first home in Collingwood. But their generosity did not stop there. They rented a cottage on Vancouver Island so that the wandering Scots would have somewhere to stay when they finally reached British Columbia. They were frequent visitors to Scotland, mainly to see Isa, but also took the time to visit friends, relatives, and of course, Rossi. Sadly, over several years, Sam's health took several turns for the worse. First cancer, which he defeated, then emphysema, which necessitated an oxygen tank backpack. He once grudgingly remarked that he had to pay a golf coach to alter his golf swing to accommodate this intrusion on his back. A true Scotsman. And finally, Parkinson's disease. Despite these setbacks, Sam and Carole continued to enjoy life in Collingwood and to escape the harsh Canadian winters, spent many happy vacations at the villages in Florida. Fondly remembered, sadly missed. Oh, and I have moved, and I've kept on moving, proved the points that I needed proving, lost the friends that I needed losing, found others on the way. Extract from Caledonia by Dougie MacLean. O flower of Scotland, when will we see your likes again? Extract from Scottish Anthem.
My early memories of Sam and Carole are when they would come to the UK. This eccentric Scottish man and his fabulous Canadian wife would arrive, and it would be a whirlwind of fun for their brief trip to the UK. It wasn't until 2013, when I had the opportunity to study abroad, that I really got to know them. I went over to Toronto to study and spend time with my great aunt and uncle. Little did I know I was about to have the best few months getting to know two of the most incredible people I've ever had the pleasure of knowing. I think back fondly to our fun-filled weekends spent together, at farmers' market buying fruit pies and fresh corn, going out for breakfast at Cora's, cooking delicious meals together, taking long walks, watching James Bond movies, sing-alongs to Johnny Cash, and dancing around their living room. I can assure you that this video is best played without the audio. Looking back now, it's such a privilege to have spent so much time getting to know them and making so many special and happy memories I will cherish forever. Sam and Carole have always been my biggest cheerleaders, encouraging me to aim high, work hard, and prioritise happiness and pleasure in life. The way they lived their lives to the fullest has and will always be a source of inspiration for me. I stumbled on this card recently that they had sent me, and the message on the front sums up their outlook on life perfectly. I am very grateful I was lucky to have them as my great aunt and uncle. There is no one quite like them. I miss them both very much.
Sam and Carole, my great aunt and uncle. In every sense of the word, they were the best. Growing up, Sam and Carole were staples in my life, despite not living in the same continent. There were always calls and emails and stories to be told. I built these characters in my head of this eccentric Scotsman, living in Florida with his beautiful and funny Canadian wife, both squeezing as much golf into every day that they could. I remember vividly when they came to visit us in Kendal one summer, and I realised I was only partly right. After we'd spent several hours in the back garden practicing my putting, eventually calling off for bad light, we were inside for dinner, and I eagerly listened to Sam's incredible selection of stories and anecdotes, while Carole looked on with wide eyes as if she was hearing it for the first time. Maybe 15 or so years later, I embarked on my first solo trip during my last long summer holiday. When my fellow students were heading to the beaches of Southeast Asia, I went the other way, to Canada. During my trip, I spent a long weekend in Collingwood. I vividly remember the train ride from Toronto, feeling anxious that I'd somehow got the wrong train and starting to realise how far from home I was. The second I got off the train, however, I saw two familiar faces waving and smiling back across the platform. All my stresses and anxieties were gone. We got in the car, Carole got in the back seat with me and wanted to know all about my trip so far, and that was it. We didn't stop talking until I got on the train a few days later. The following morning, we headed to the driving range, but not before donning the appropriate attire. Sam had a few outfits in mind for me. Now, dressed like my great uncle, anything was possible, and we spent the best part of the day hitting balls. I remember arriving at the club. It'd take us a good 30 minutes to actually make it through the shop. Everyone wanted to speak to Sam, and Sam wanted to speak to everyone. He really was the local Scottish celebrity I imagined him to be. Each night before dinner, Carole and I would walk along the bay outside the house. She would share mischievous tales of the young Cooper brothers from back in the day, as well as some from more recent times. She wanted to know my plans for the rest of the trip, as well as the university gossip back in Sheffield. We'd watch the sunset and then head back home in the dark, nattering away just like two pals. I remember those walks so vividly. Carole made me feel so at ease. We would talk about everything and anything. She was so positive and warm. We were just two old friends catching up. From that weekend, we would email non-stop, with each email longer than the last, filled with life updates, Collingwood updates, and of course, golf updates. I would always smile when I got the notification. I miss them both so much. They were one of a kind and perfect for each other. They were my great, fantastic, amazing aunt and uncle.
This is the song all four of our girls sang for Ian to give him comfort. He loved to hear his girls singing together, and when I played this to him over and over, it made him smile. I'm in my bed, and you're not here, and there's no one to blame but the drink in my wandering hands. Forget what I said, it's not what I meant, and I can't take it back. I can't unpack the baggage you left. What am I now? What am I now? What if I'm someone I don't want around? I'm falling again, I'm falling again, I'm falling. What if I'm down? What if I'm out? What if I'm someone you won't talk about? I'm falling again, I'm falling again, I'm falling. You said that you care, and you miss me too. And I'm well aware I write too many songs about you. And the coffee's out at the Beechwood Cafe, and it kills me 'cause I know we've run out of things we can say. What am I now? What am I now? What if I'm someone I don't want around? I'm falling again, I'm falling again, I'm falling. What if I'm down? What if I'm out? What if I'm someone you won't talk about? I'm falling again, I'm falling again, I'm falling. I get the feeling that you'll never need me again. What am I now? What am I now? What if I'm someone I don't want around? I'm falling again, I'm falling again, I'm falling. What if I'm down?
Realized they were all stitched together so nicely. That was sent to us by the McKechnie family. One of Sam's godsons, Ian McKechnie, sadly passed away recently, young, and he left his widow Jan and 4 daughters, and it's the 4 daughters that you hear singing in that piece. Falling, they sent by email, Falling for Daddy. They recorded it when they lost their dad, and they'd sent it to Carole and Sam, and they were very touched by it, and they wanted to have it included. They sent these little comments here. Sam and Carole, our chats were a great help to the girls, and it helped orientate us in Canada. Later, as Ian deteriorated, the photos you sent of Sam with the McKechnie boys jogged Ian's memory and gave us all a laugh. It was lovely for the girls to get the first-hand family history. We miss our recollections and swapping of our medical research together. But know you are still with us now, and each and every time we think of you. All our love, Jan, Tabby, Tilly, Plum, and Clara. Now I call upon my mother, Kathy Hartman, to share some reflections. Thank you.
Hello, friends and relatives of Carole and Sam. I share your loss of two lovely people, and I celebrate their memory today. I've known Carole longer than my lifetime. I only admit to 40. Carole and I met sometime in the early 70s. Our companies had merged to become Greenfields. She was with one company and I with the other. We found ourselves in close quarters, wedged between her boss and mine. Circumstances put us together, but working together daily, we became friends. Our duties were completely different. She, the executive secretary of one of the vice presidents, I, supervised the valuation department and assisted in trading securities for the Templeton Mutual Fund. My boss was a vice president of Templeton and also its trader, and also a vice president of Greenshields as well. I think she had a crush on my boss, as he was very young and very good looking. She took an interest in my job and offered to help whenever she could. As we carried out our responsibilities, we found time to chat, share confidences, and our histories. How coincidental could it be that two very different people would find a common relative? She was telling me about her cousin, who was into martial arts, and that he was dating a lovely Oriental girl. That sounds like my sister. What's his name? Etc., etc. It turned out that her cousin would be my future brother-in-law, Frank. We marveled at such a coincidence. Furthermore, we discovered that we all grew up in less than a 5-mile radius of each other. Carole was an only child, whereas I come from a very large family. I invited her to a family dinner, warning her in advance to brace herself, but she was not deterred. She loved the noise and the chaos, but I'm sure she was glad to get home that night. Strangely enough, she looked forward to our future family get-togethers. Dee was a teenager, and Susie almost. When I asked them if they would like to be baptized, both said yes. An affection had definitely was growing between Carole and the girls, so when I asked Carole if she would like to be their godmother, she enthusiastically agreed. Since this is all ancient history and my recollections of everything is not exactly precise, but Sam came into her life during this period. We were invited to a beautiful wedding, and somewhere along the line, Sam decided since Carole was godmother, he appointed himself as godfather. a surrogate. Over the years, we enjoyed evenings at each other's homes. Carole learned that vegetables cooked al dente were much more preferable, but I never learned or even attempted Yorkshire pudding. They were a special treat when we dined at their place. In 1992, I moved to Fort Lauderdale with my job, and I was delighted to have Carole and Sam be snowbirds, as she inherited her father's home in Sun City. Unfortunately, it was on the opposite side of Florida. So about twice a year, I would drive over to Sun City on the long weekends, and we created an annual competition of golf. Sometimes Sam joined us, but more often he would say, "You girls go out and enjoy." We continued this ritual for many years in Sun City, and then following them up to the villages. I brought Bob, my friend, to meet them, and he fell in love with Sam. They could talk together for hours. Carole and Sam never got a word in edgewise. My summer visits home would always include a golf game with them here in Cranberry and somewhere in the mountains. The relationship between Carole and my girls grew stronger in my absence. My relationship was rather sporadic, as I'm terrible with phone calls or letters. But with Carole, it didn't matter. When we connected, our conversations were as if we were just continuing along the lines from just last week. Carole was like that, as I'm sure those of you who knew her would agree. Sam would always say, "How's your golf game?" Or, "What do you think of the market?" It's funny. Still, every now and then I think I must call Carole to share something with her. It's hard to let go. Even though it was very difficult for them, I'm glad my girls, Dee especially, were there for them at the end. I'm sure it meant a lot to Carole. I knew when I asked her that Carole would be a good godmother. I never expected her to be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Mom. I'm just going to call Barry Weir now. He's on the program to speak next and share some reflections and memories. Thank you, Barry.
Can you hear me all? Can you hear me? I'll just hold it. Anyways, thank you all for coming. Listen, ma'am?
We'll just take it right out of the...
Oh, the house? Okay, yeah, take it right out of the house. Thanks. Yeah, I met Sam about 20 years ago. My late wife and I bought our place on Barker Boulevard, and I just returned from Florida. And the first couple that we met when we moved into Collingwood was Sam and Carole. Of the 10 units, Sam came over and welcomed us to Collingwood, and found out that Sam really is a salesman. Trust me. He could sell ice to an Eskimo. When I first met him, I realized that I was dealing with a salesman, and he's also a wheeler dealer. Trust me. He has a reputation at the golf course that if you want to buy a house or sell a house, call Sam first. He'll sell your house for you. He has sold many. But in all seriousness, I can reflect on several stories, but there's a couple of stories that are very memorial. Is the fact that I have a place in Clearwater, Florida, and it was referenced here earlier that Sam had a place in Sun City. And while we were in Florida, Sam would either call me once a month or I would call Sam. Sam would always say, "How's your golf game?" And I'd say, "Good days and bad days, Sam." Well, this time, about 10 years ago, he called me and I said, "Sam, you're in trouble this summer." He said, "Why is that?" I said, "I just bought a new driver. It's an oversized driver, call it Big Red. I'm hitting the ball 30 to 40 yards further, so you better save up your money because it's going to go away this summer." Well, I guess he was concerned because sure enough, he called me a week later and said, "Hey, can Carole and I come over and see you?" I thought this was just a friendly visit. No, he wanted to see the club. Needless to say, he arrived with Carole. My late wife and I, we had a few drinks. Sam doesn't drink because of his colon cancer. He wanted to go to the golf shop immediately. I said, "Yeah, it's about 20 minutes away." So we go into the golf shop. First of all, before that, he took a look at my club and he said, "Can we go to the golf shop?" We go to the golf shop. He walks in. They had a demo net there. He looked at it, hit the ball a few times, said, "I'll take 3. I said, 3? Well, I knew then, right then and there, he was coming back to sell the other 2. Sure enough, because Sam has a reputation. He's not cheap, he's thrifty. And he's always buying and selling golf clubs, as many of you can in this room can maybe attest to. Anyways, we come back. First week of May, he's on the tee box. I'm playing with him. And he's got this driver all taped up with masking tape. And I said, "Sam, that's an illegal club. You can't play with that. We're playing for money." He says, "I haven't decided whether I'm going to buy it or not. I might return it in the fall." It was also alluded to the fact that Sam and Carole paid a lot of attention to the stock market, which that's my forte. I act as a bit of a consultant. I gave it up a few years ago. But anyways, this was about 3 or 4 years ago. True story. Sam and Carole are working on their tax returns for the year. Sam calls me in Florida. Says, "Barry, can I pick your brain?" I said, "Sure, Sam, what's up?" He says, "Well, he says, Carole and I got some U.S. dividends." I said, "Yeah." And he says, "Well, they take a withholding tax." I said, "That's right. It's called a non-resident 15% withholding tax. It's for people that are Canadians, and the government, the IRS, wants their share." So he said to me, he says, "Can I claim it back?" I said, "You can claim it back, but you only get a certain percentage. You got to fill out a 2-page form." And I said, "Send it into the IRS, and they will give you a percentage, and you'll get the money back." But I said, "Sam," I said, "how much money are we talking about here? Are we talking a couple of $1,000s?" He says, "No, $20. I said, "$20? I said, "You're going to spend $50 filling out the form." Secondly, I said, the IRS, now they've got you in your database, you could be audited. "Oh, hell," he says, "I don't want that to happen." But in all seriousness, I think that Carole was the backbone of Sam, because Sam was a wheeler dealer. And anyone at the golf course knows that. He was always buying and selling. But Carole was a steadying influence. And I personally, and I know a lot of you who are in this room, are going to sorely miss them going forward. Thank you.
I appreciate you putting that back together. Work?
Yeah.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Oh, your mask.
Oh, yes.
Thank you, Barry. Now, in the program, it says, open the floor to others wishing to speak. I know there are a couple of people said they might feel up to speaking, so if there's anyone here who would like to share a memory of Carole or Sam or both of them, please feel welcome to share. Thank you. I'm not sure if I recognize everybody, so you'll have to introduce yourself.
Thanks. Should I have done that? Hi, I'm George, a friend of Sam. I've known Sam about 20 years. I miss the man dearly. I know it was said here that Sam didn't drink because he had a colon problem. And the fact is, Sam was an alcoholic, as I am. I met Sam at an AA meeting 20 years ago. I had 10 years sobriety at that time. Sam had 20. We sponsored each other in Alcoholics Anonymous for over 40 years, or actually 30 years, and he celebrated 42 years this year. Sam was a person who went into the trenches with the poor people that had the affliction of alcoholism. I've seen him take so many people to so many meetings and stick by them and help them out as best he can. One story that wasn't told here, maybe some of you know this story. Sam told me this a few years ago. The person that helped Sam out to get in the headhunting business had fallen on hard times. Sam was doing quite well, him and Carole, and Sam, as usual, liked to call up old friends to see how they're doing. So he called up his old friend. He says, "How are you doing?" I forget his name now. And he says, his wife answers, he says, "Well, he's not too well." And he explained the situation to him. And I think Sam had something like $3,000 in his bank account at the time, him and Carole, and he sent all $3,000 to that man who had helped him out in business. That's the kind of the guy Sam was. Yeah. He gave all to everyone. He loved Carole dearly, and he loved life, and he loved AA, and he gave to so many people, and I'm so grateful for his presence because we sponsor each other in the program. I don't know if you know anything about the program, but a lot of this the format that was done today was a lot of AA material, the Serenity Prayer and things like that. But Sam dearly believed in life. He believed in sobriety. He believed in every person he'd ever met. He always said, like bravery is just a fact of life, and you have to face life on life's terms. If you don't, you're going to die, and that's exactly how he puts things across, straight and forward. He's a straight shooter, always has been, and I'm sure if he was alive today, him and Carole would just thank you so much for showing up today. He loved you guys, and he loved us too. I mean, he was a wonderful man, and I thank you for the opportunity to say something. Appreciate it, guys. I'm sorry for breaking his anonymity, but he would have wanted me to say that. Thanks.
Thank you, George. I didn't know that. I know that AA is a very anonymous organization, and so people choose to share that information at their own discretion. I also wanted to thank you, George, for all the baking you did for Sam, Carole and Sam, because those were some of the sweets that we would offer him that he would gladly accept after a meal or at tea time. So thank you for your visits with the baked goods. Anybody else like to come and share? Kathleen is going to share a few words. Kathleen is next door neighbor at Cranberry Key. Thank you, Kathleen.
I knew Sam and Carole for over 13 years when we first moved from Saskatchewan to Ontario. I'm not from Saskatchewan, I'm actually from England. So Sam and I, even though I'm English and he was very Scottish, we did have some connection. At least we're from the same island. So, and he loved Scotland, and so did Carole. And I remember many, many times that they would invite us over, and we would sit through photographs and videos of the Isle of Bute and listen to the music, and they just loved it so much. And we, in turn, as we retired and started traveling ourselves, we would take them, have them over and share our photographs and videos of various places. And I always remember Carole at one time, we'd been to Italy, and she said, "I've always wanted to go to Italy." So I said, well, maybe the next time you go to Scotland, you could go over to Italy. It's not that far. Oh, no, she said, we could only go to the Isle of Bute. But she loved that, and so did they had such wonderful times together. And I remember when we first moved and we got to know them, they would go every year to Florida, go down to, at that time, I think they were in the villages. And we would take their mail in and collect it up over the winter and try and get it when we started traveling as well to Florida. In fact, one time they invited us down to their place. I think they'd just bought something, but they were actually renting. And they were very keen on us maybe buying something and so we could be neighbors all the year round. But when we got down there, we're great lovers of the ocean, and so we were not that keen on the villages because it wasn't by the ocean. And I remember them trying to say to us, well, it doesn't really matter because the only thing we're interested in is golf, and that's true. Both of them absolutely love golf. My memory was when one of the years Sam was, he was in a playoff for the seniors championship. And I remember saying to him, well, good luck tomorrow, Sam. And he said, yes, it's very important that I win. And I said, well, I'm sure you will. Just play your best. He said, well, that's all you can ever do with golf, he said. Because he'd always say, how's your golf game, as everybody else has mentioned. Anyway, sadly, he didn't win. So he was quite discouraged. And I said to him, oh, come on, Sam. I said, there'll always be next year. And he said, maybe not. And I don't think there ever was another year. I think he played the odd game, but his health began to deteriorate. So he always used to say to us when we were out playing golf, play like it's your last game. Always play like it's your last game. And in terms of Carole, well, Carole was the most kind and generous and wonderful neighbor you could wish for. She loved flowers. She loved making everything look very, very beautiful around the area, and we would spend time trying to put new plants into the common elements around us, and she had a good eye for beauty, and she loved flowers. And when they had to stop traveling, I always remember her saying, Sam and I haven't been able to go anywhere for the last year or two. She said, but she said, I'm thinking of renewing our passports. I said, well, that's a good idea, Carole, because you never know, you might be able to go. She said, yes. So a few weeks later, she said to me, I got our new passports. And I said, oh, great, Carole. She said, yeah, I got 10-year ones. That was the kind of person she was, very optimistic. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kathleen, for sharing those fond memories. Was there anyone else that wanted to share a few words? If not, I guess I just wanted to share the plans for releasing their ashes and some memorial benches that we alluded to earlier. After both Carole and Sam died, they were cremated shortly afterwards, and we have since combined their ashes. I'm not sure if any of you noticed, but there's this lovely lavender-colored packet here on the table, and that's a combination, and we will be releasing them after the service here in the Collingwood Water. We also have another packet that we're saving for Scotland, and that was part of their wishes. As many of you know, they loved Rossi on the Isle of Bute in Scotland, but we also wanted to mark their many happy years here in Collingwood and honor their memory in both locations. Sam had always said that he wanted his ashes scattered on Rossi Bay, And thanks to Sam's niece, Andrea, she reminded us that Sam and his brother Ian had a memorial bench placed on the Isle of Bute dedicated to their father when he passed away. So after Carole passed in December, we were in correspondence with Andrea, and she was kind enough to share a note from Carole, who wrote to her and said, "There is something about the island that mesmerizes me. Sometimes when I think about it, my heart seems to ache." And then, as Andrea said, if only she knew how much our hearts would ache with her passing. So, of course, when Sam passed so quickly after, we decided to have a memorial bench installed in the same area as his father's bench. And we actually have a video, if we could run it, thanks to my child, Camille Belair, for putting the video together. It features the beautiful violin playing of my niece, Samantha Orr. And I'm not sure if you all had an opportunity to see the earlier slideshow, but that also is credited to both of them. So I guess when the video starts playing, we'll see that the bench in Scotland has a fantastic view on Mount Stewart Road. I'll just wait for it. And it has a memorial plaque which reads... at the Argyll and Butte Council office for sending these photos. This is down the street on Balsam Road. It's just around the corner from here, and that's the start of White Spade Trail. There's a grassy patch, as you can see, just beyond two huge weeping willows, and that is the site of the memorial bench. So my husband and I got here Friday, and we were thrilled to discover that the bench has now been installed. So it is there. It's quite a lovely bench. We will also get a similar plaque installed on the bench once it's finalized. We also want to thank Wendy Martin at the town of Collingwood for letting us put the bench there. Unfortunately, we wanted it to be on the water, but with all the recent flooding and the erosion, I guess there's some issue about fragile limestone on the water area, and so we had picked a nice area there, but unfortunately they said we couldn't have it, so we figured that just at the end of the road was the next best thing. So if any of you have the opportunity to just go down the street where Balsam ends, you can spend a quiet moment with the Coopers. I'll pass things back to my sister. Thank you.
At this point, I wanted to say thank you again to everyone. Thank you to all the family and the friends for sharing their memories. Thank you to Ken. Thank you to my mother, Kathy Hartman, Ian Cooper, Andrea and Jim, who helped him, Catherine and Keir Loudon, the grandniece and grandnephew, Jan McKechnie and her 4 girls, Barry Weir, and Daniel Carr, again, for the lovely piping. And we are planning to release this packet onto the waterfront, and it does look like it's rather wet. It looks like maybe it has stopped raining. We invite anyone who feels that they want to brave the elements to join us walking out to the water's edge. Jim from Fawcett Funeral Home is going to go onto the rocks and release the ashes for us. There's a lovely view here by the windows as well, so if you'd prefer to stay here, remain in the room, and just watch and say your goodbyes. There are some rose petals that we've put in a basket here. If you'd like to put one or two rose petals into the water in lieu of scattering the ashes, just feel free to do that. Once we've released the ashes into the water, we invite all of you to remain. There will be a luncheon that's served, and we would hope that all of you are able to stay with us for the luncheon. You are welcome to stay in the room, as I said, while we're outside, and nobody will in any way have any judgment of anyone wanting to stay inside where it's dry. I wanted to also thank everyone, Camille, my niece Camille, Belair, Samantha, my daughter, for their contributions to the video and the slideshow. Thank you to my uncle Frank, Carole's cousin, his wife, my Aunt Irene. So many people that have come from out of town, and I don't know everybody's name, but Gail and her husband Ted, and I don't think I've even met them yet. Hi, Denise and Murray driving up, and Lynn drove in from Vineland. So a lot of people have come a long way, and we really appreciate you coming to join us for the celebration of life for Carole and Sam. I also wanted to thank Jessica Veluis. I'm not sure if she's here today, but she has been a tremendous help with setting up this venue for us, doing the social distancing with the extra chairs and extra tables. So we really appreciate all of her efforts to keep everyone safe and comfortable here for our gathering. I also wanted to thank Daniel York from the Fawcett Funeral Home, who has guided us through this entire process. From the Campbell House Hospice, Jim came and helped me say my goodbyes to both Carole and Sam, and they did a lovely procession where Jim took Carole and Sam to the Fawcett Funeral Home. So thank you, Jim, for those moments. I wanted to thank everyone for joining us through the live stream, and also thank the technical team from Fawcett Funeral Home, who are the crew back at the Doug and Marcia. I'm not sure if I met everybody, but thank you for all of your work to allow us to share the celebration with the people who couldn't travel here in Canada, from the West Coast and from the UK. So thank you very much. We really appreciate all those efforts. I'm not sure if I did that or if that's just Sam letting us go out with a bang. So we're off to the waterfront at this point. Anyone who wishes to join us, please do. Anyone who would like to remain here, please do. Feel free to walk up to the windows to observe the water. Oh, apparently the whole celebration of life has been recorded. It will be available if anybody wants to see it again or watch any of the videos again. My sister says that they will be online as well. And if anybody, is that through the Fawcett Funeral Home? Through the Fawcett Funeral Home. So thank you very much, and we look forward to some fellowship refreshment after the ashes are released. So please stay and we'll have a chance to chat. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Fall in, Jim.
Don't fall. Doesn't want to float nicely, huh? Or sail out. Don't leave us. I don't want to go.
Don't do it, Jim.